Okay, so the second part of my talk is on unity, and based on our reading that we've just had, which is Ephesians chapter 3, verses 1 to 12. So the reading we've just had was a letter, and it's like a statement of the way God's love will bring all people together in unity. It's about the importance of unity amongst believers, and to remember no one is more important than another. Paul was commissioned to preach the good news to the Gentiles, the outsiders, to bring them into God's family, bring them into the in-crowd. This, along with the visitors that visited Jesus, the outsiders who visited Jesus that we thought about earlier, got me thinking, who are God's people? Is it the people that go to church? Is it people that fall into a set criteria? Do we see ourselves as God's children? If we do, then that's really good, because we need to have confidence in that. But who do we ever look at and think are not part of our in-crowd? Is there anybody that we think, no, they're not part of God's family? The church on a whole has been criticised over time for its lack of inclusiveness. There are so many groups of people who feel they are left out of God's physical family, and so are put off ever making that journey to find God for themselves. There are lots of people who feel out of place due to their race, their class, or their lifestyle. I've felt it myself on occasions too. And although I do know that at the moment lots of churches are working extremely hard to try and combat that though, if we don't look around and see people who look like us or sound like us, or people who we can relate to, or people who relate to us, we naturally turn away. Just like if there's a group of people talking about rugby, I'll probably think it's boring and I'd go off and do something else. And for many, this is then related to God. They then see that as God. There is not really a diverse representation in the church, particularly in leadership. There are people who don't meet the criteria to become followers of Jesus. Moreover, never get the opportunity to seek him because of that. For lots of people out there is an in-crowd and an out-crowd. For certain groups in our society, their expectation of meeting God is rules, a need to be perfect, a need to live a specific life, not being good enough, and often a feeling of irrelevance. Church for lots of people is boring, outdated, and a judgmental space. The wise men, although foreigners, came before Jesus with confidence. What would it take for this to be true for so many today? During the lockdown period, I've made connections with people who are looking at intercultural communities and practices, and I've had the opportunity to hear different people's opinions and experiences of church. From these conversations, it seems to me, personally, that the culture of the church needs to change. Too often, worship means wordy services, using language which is unfamiliar to so many people, music that is alien to lots of people too, and decisions being made by a representation of a small minority group of people. We need to think about who influences what we do, even down to our worship. Real conversations are needed where all feel listened to and can ask questions without worrying about offending anybody or being judged themselves. As a church, perhaps we need to stop doing things to people and start to include and listen and empower all people. This would involve redistributing power, control, and then trusting God. In one meeting I was in about BAME community practices, I wrote something down, and I have to admit I don't remember who said it. I didn't note down who said it or where it was from, I'm afraid, but I still think it's quite important, a good point. It was said that if a voice is to be heard, 35% of the voices of that voice needs to be involved. So 35% of the people talking needs to be that representation for that voice to be heard. So that's quite massive. That's a massive thing, and I think it's quite telling as to why voices aren't heard. We need to reflect on people who we personally see as not being in with the in crowd. Even if they are living a life away from what God would want for them personally, how will they ever know if they can't be part of God's family and have the opportunity to draw close to him in the first place? We need unity amongst believers and to remember that no one is more important than another. In him, Jesus, in him and through faith in him, we may approach God with freedom and confidence.